So hey everyone, I'm Spencer from Spearbit. It's another one of our seminars. We've been doing them pretty much bi-weekly. As always, looking for community feedback in terms of which speakers you'd like. So please just hit us up in Q&A or the general chat, and just if you want to nominate someone to speak in front of the community, we'd love to to continue to bring some diverse voices to share knowledge. So today we're honored to have Christian from Forta, and he's going to give overview of what Forta's up to in terms of incident response and their products that they're building. So Christian, I'll turn it over to you.
Yeah, thank you. And we also have Andy Beal, head of ecosystem at Forta. So we'll tag team a little bit here to give you a brief overview of Forta. We'll not dive into a ton of detail. If there's interest, we can certainly do a follow-up session where we get a little bit more technical and look under the hood on what Forta looks like. But I thought kind of to start things out, I'll talk through a few of attacks that happened over the last couple of months to give you a little bit of insights on what Forta is really all about. So the first attack that I'll briefly talk through is the Badger DAO attack. So this was an ice fishing attack where the Badger DAO website essentially was compromised to modify it in such a way that the attacker injected or modified the website to inject fake or hacker-controlled ERC20 approvals. And so that happened, at the beginning of December. And so then users essentially went to the website. They thought they interacted with the Badger DAO contract, but what they really assigned were ERC20 approvals to the attacker. And so that happened over a period of a few weeks. And then so this end of November was when the website was compromised. And then so the attacker accumulated a whole bunch of approvals. And then on December 2nd, they actually drained essentially a whole bunch of wallets. And so if you look on chain, you see all of these transactions, and what Forta is able to do is monitor these transactions and essentially raise alerts or findings, we call them, based on community developed detection bots. So protocols are aware that these attacks are happening and able to mitigate. Now here in this example, there were several weeks essentially involved in the attack, giving ample opportunities for the protocol to respond, assuming they monitor and have incident response processes. Ronin attack, which many of you may be familiar with, looks very different. The Ronin attack was the Ronin bridge essentially was compromised, and in this particular attack, the attacker was able to obtain essentially the signing keys to then issue one withdrawal transaction to drain funds from the bridge. So there wasn't a lot of kind of on-chain transactions, but I think this one is an interesting one because the compromise, the attack, wasn't uncovered for several days. So March 23rd was when the funds were drained, and it wasn't uncovered until March 29th when a user tried to withdraw some funds from the bridge and essentially received errors. And so I think this is an example where even if the attack is completed, able to alert and identify that quickly is super important, because one thing to keep in mind, between the 23rd and the 29th, users still happily deposited into the bridge that essentially was controlled by the attacker. So with that, Andy, you want to kind of walk through kind of the high level of Forta and what Forta is about, and then I'll take it back when I talk about threats.
Okay, yeah, sounds good, Christian. Is it possible at the end of my slides, can I quickly show the the Explorer. Can we quickly pull that up too?
Yeah.
Just so I can, just so everyone sort of understands what an alert looks like and where they come from. Okay. Um, so as Christian mentioned, I lead ecosystem development at Forta, and I want to provide a high level overview of Forta, particularly kind of where we sit relative to other security practices and tools that you're probably familiar with, and then I'll talk about how DeFi protocols primarily are leveraging Forta to monitor both the security and health of their contracts post deployment. So this is a really simple framework, overly simplistic, but I think it's helpful to sort of orient you sort of where Forta sits in the Web3 security stack. So there's things you do pre-deployment, there's things you do post-deployment, and Forta, it lives in this real-time monitoring and alerting layer of the security stack. So we're focused on post-deployment, real-time monitoring and alerting. And as I'll get into a little bit later, really focused on threat detection, suspicious activity, anomaly detection, etc. And I think I'll point out there's obviously a really close relationship between real-time monitoring and alerts and the incident response function, right? You can have great alerts, but if you don't have a team and a plan in place to respond to them, then they're not particularly helpful, right? So we view those last two bullets there as sort of, it's really a package deal from a process standpoint. So a great analogy, I think if you walk away sort of, with a visual of what Forta is, I think this is a great sort of visual. Forta is a giant shared security camera and alarm system for Web3. And Christian, can you go to the next slide? It breaks down into essentially two components, and both of these are permissionless. So we have bots, and we have nodes. Bots are like the little security cameras that any developer can write and install on the network, right? And you can point those cameras at whatever you want to watch. It can be very protocol specific things. It can be very generic, transaction activity on a network. It doesn't matter. What you can do inside of bots is extremely flexible. And then we have scan nodes. Important to point out, our nodes are not like blockchain nodes, so they're not maintaining, copies of a ledger or an EVM. Our nodes are running bots against each block of processed transactions. So you can think about nodes as like the alarm system that's keeping the security cameras running 24/7, right? As I said, both of these functions are open and permissionless now. So we've had hundreds of developers publish all types of bots to the network, some monitoring operational things, and increasingly, and sort of most exciting is a lot of the threat-related bots that we have, which Christian's going to talk about. And then on the node side as well, we've got about a little over 1,500 node runners today that are running the Forta node software and are active. Their nodes are actively sort of running these bots. So two general sort of monitoring use cases that teams are using Forta for today. Operational monitoring, you can think about like performance monitoring. So monitoring all of the components of the system, making sure that they're working like they're supposed to, right? So here, you're getting a lot of informational alerts. You're getting a lot of alerts that you would expect to get, right? Assuming your system is operating like it's supposed to. Could be oracles, could be multi-sigs, could be liquidity, could be administrative events. There's a laundry list of things that teams are monitoring on the operational side, and there's a lot of consistency across protocols too, right? When it comes to this. On the threat side, this is a much more specialized sort of type of monitoring. What we found talking with hundreds of teams at this point is most teams aren't doing any in-house threat detection for two reasons. One, it's harder to do, more specialized. You need to understand, threat patterns. You need to spend time looking at historical exploits. You need to understand your own, sort of specific attack vectors that are unique to your system. But then you need to have tools that allow you to do this. And there aren't great tools that make threat detection really easy today. So that's one of the things that we're focused on and what Christian's going to get more into. Christian, can we pull up the Explorer real quick, and then I'll walk through that for 60 seconds, and then I'll pass it back to you.
Sure.
Okay. So what's the Forta network look like today? So I'll show you two things. So what Christian's showing here is the Forta Explorer. This is our version of Etherscan. So I think important to highlight that all alerts emitted by Forta are by default public, which is why you're seeing them here. We've got about 30 different DeFi protocols, at least 30, that have some sort of monitoring on Forta today. And I think over 95% of the users are, all of their bots, all of their alerts are public, which is, I think a trend that we expect to continue, especially as, a lot of these projects, decentralize their operations more, and token holders have more sort of more say in the governance of these systems. It's really important to sort of socialize a lot of this real-time health and security information with the broader community, right? Not just the core team. So Christian's showing you sort of the data elements that you'll see in an alert. And each line item on that Explorer, behind the scenes, there's a bot running, right, that's watching for that specific activity. And when it finds it, it emits an alert. Christian, can you go to the network page real quick? I just want to show everybody what the footprint looks like. So just to sort of give you a sense of what the size of the Forta network looks like in terms of coverage. We started with Ethereum. We've added 6 other EVM chains since then. So Forta is now scanning activity and contracts across Polygon, BSC, Avalanche, Optimism, Arbitrum, and Phantom, and we'll continue to add other EVM chains in the short term, and then eventually non-EVM chains as well. Okay. I guess before we go, Christian, do you have a comment? I was also going to see if anybody had any questions before we jump more into the threat stuff.
Yeah, one small comment with the nodes that we have and kind of how bots are assigned to the nodes. There is some redundancy within the network. So if you have a bot that you deploy to the network, it will get deployed on multiple of these nodes. So you have some redundancy with that.
Any questions on some of the high level details on Forta? Otherwise, Christian will dive more into what we're doing on the threat detection side. Okay. All right, Christian, back to you.
Thanks, Andy. So one thing, we're looking at attacks on chain, and by analyzing past attacks, we identified a common pattern that an attack goes through, which is depicted on this slide. So an attacker usually goes through a funding stage. They need to have some funds associated with their account in order to execute the attack. So think of, they need gas, right? For instance, or to pay for gas. So that's funding. And usually that comes from, either already malicious accounts or through privacy protocols like Tornado Cash. Then they go through a preparation stage. So the Badger DAO attack that I mentioned, all the approvals that they essentially tricked users into making is an example of that. If you want to execute a reentrancy attack, well, you need to have an attacker contract that needs to be deployed. So that's in the preparation stage. Then they proceed into the attack stage. There's a lot of opportunity there's a lot of opportunity, but also a lot of variety there in terms of how to detect that. So think of, flash loan types of attacks, price manipulation, re-entrancy, etc. And then once they have obtained and diverted funds, then they usually move into a money laundering stage, swapping ERC for 20 for native tokens, or then utilize, again, privacy-related protocols like Tornado Cash to launder the funds. Now, if you look at this as kind of like a progression, as the attacker moves towards the right of this particular flow, our confidence in that this is actually an attack increases. Now, after money laundering, things are pretty late, right? It's very hard to then mitigate. But I think the Ronin attack that I mentioned earlier is a good example where you still want to have that signal in order to mitigate future risk. But ideally, we want to push all the detection towards the left, where in the funding and preparation phase, we have high confidence that an attack is actually happening. Now, one thing the protocols can do, and Andy mentioned, there's protocols are able to develop, custom detection bots for their particular protocol. Often protocols don't necessarily have the expertise, so they may outsource to some of kind of integrators into Forta, and we have both kind of companies that we match protocols up to, as well as community members. And so there's several community members that are helping protocols to develop bots as well. But that is only one path, right? You can develop custom bots, but you can also subscribe to something that we refer to as threat detection kits. And so these are essentially generic bots that detect these generic attack techniques pertaining to these 4 stages that I showed on the previous slide. And all you need to do essentially to get security relevant value out of Forta is to subscribe to these threat detection kits. So let me show you on where that is on the Forta app and how that would work. So here's the Forta app, and Monitor My Contracts is essentially the threat detection kit subscription side. So it's curated based on the type of protocol you are, NFT, DeFi, bridge, governance, and stablecoins. What I'm pulling up here is essentially the threat detection kit for DeFi, and here are all the bots that are part of that particular threat detection kit. You enter your contract addresses here, and then essentially decide on how you want to receive the alerts, either email, Slack, or Discord. And as you go through the documentation for the threat detection kits, it kind of explains each of the bots. Some of the bots are out of the box. They're already deployed. You merely need to subscribe to. Sometimes bots require a little bit of customization. And what we do here is we provide a set of templates that eventually will be available through a UI bot wizard that makes it very easy for you to customize essentially the template for a particular protocol and deploy that. And then in the threat detection kit bot details, you'll find more details on each of the bots, including links to the GitHub repo. Now, if you do want to develop a threat detection bot yourself, it is really easy. We provide an SDK. It supports a variety of languages: TypeScript, JavaScript, and Python. And I will not be able to deep dive into much detail here on how that would look like, but happy to do a follow-up session to actually look at an attack, look at the corresponding Forta alerts, and then actually develop a bot from scratch. It is permissionless, as Andy mentioned, and so you could have a bot developed and deployed on the Forta network and receiving alerts within an hour. And I'm not really over exaggerating here. Of course, there is a lot of variety in terms of the complexity of the bots, but like a simple heuristic based bot, you'll have up and running in no time. The other thing that I wanted to show, let me go back to the slides, is how to get involved. So we, of course, have our Discord with the broader Forta community, but we also hosting these contests. And that's actually how I personally got involved into Forta. I worked on the Badger DAO contest back in December. We just completed a contest in April that was focused on time series analysis. We certainly feel like machine learning and data science can provide a lot of value to the network, a lot of value to protocols and Web3 overall. And so we're working towards a contest in the a data science space. So the April one was a time series anomaly detection contest. And we're currently working on a new contest that is likely to get published next week. That was that is related to the saddle finance attack that happened in April. That really pushes some more of advanced concepts of bot development. Bots today, basically what happens is a scan node that has a deployed bot feeds transactions and blocks to the bot to analyze. And then you have logic that does that and emits the finding. But that's not all the capabilities. A bot can actually receive a transaction, identify something suspicious, and then locally fork the blockchain using Ganache and simulate transactions. We have a protocol, Yearn, that already uses that capability more for operational monitoring. But in the saddle finance attack, there was an opportunity to actually simulate the attack before it happened. So once the attacker contract was deployed, you had an opportunity to simulate the attack and essentially emit a high confidence alert several blocks before the attacker actually did. So that's going to be a contest that will be announced sometime next week. And so keep an eye out on our Twitter, Forta Network, as well as our Discord. And so I hope that's an opportunity for you to get involved and really get your hands on Forta and develop a detection bot yourself. And as I said, happy to do a follow-up session to walk you through on how bot development works in detail. Let me pause here for any questions.
Yeah, I have a question. Do you have any examples of like contracts pausing things in real life?
Yes, so that's a very interesting point. So the transactions that are happening in these attacks, Badger DAO maybe being an exception, are very fast, right? Like it's several blocks, right, from the funding, preparation, exploitation, and money laundering. And so there is an element of having an automated incident response process hooked up, like pausing a smart contract. Forta does integrate with Open Zeppelin's Defender, that allow you to configure exactly that flow, where you have a alert, and if that alert fires, then a pause, a smart contract function will be invoked. And Andy, I don't know whether we have specific examples of any protocols that are doing that today. Obviously, Open Zeppelin Defender is separate from Forta, but I know they integrate with us.
Yeah, it is a great question. I am aware of one team that is developing sort of automated actions based on Forta alerts, but it's on the operational side, not on the threat side. I think on the threat side, there's going to be a more scrutiny on taking an automated action, right? Because that is possible. It is possible to game that, right? If a hacker knows there's an automated action in place, right? They could take advantage of that. So I know we're talking to a lot of teams about this, and it seems like everyone today that does have some sort of ability to pause is it's all set up sort of manually through a multi-sig, and there's some amount of time between when the alert generates and when that multi-sig actually takes an action to do that.
And then there's more questions coming in the Q&A. So I'll read DefSec's question. What about the private bots? Is it possible to run private bots / nodes?
Yes. So we do have while bots and their alerts are public by default, you can sort of obfuscate your bot code, and you can encrypt the alert output. We do have a few teams. Liquidity is one of them that I can mention publicly. That does have exclusively private monitoring on Forta. So their alerts are not showing up on the Explorer. You won't find them anywhere on the website. But they do have actually a fairly comprehensive suite of bots running on the network right now. And I think the teams that are doing private monitoring are using dashboards like Defender to sort of manage the decryption of that that output, because you can manage that inside of Defender. So yes, it is possible. It just requires a little bit more work.
Got it. And then another question from Plachi. Do you see Forta being used to track mostly security concerns, or is there room for tracking events such as ongoing sibling transactions?
Christian, I'm going to let you take a swing at that one.
Can you elaborate a little bit on that question? Sorry.
Plachi, you want to speak to that? No, Mike. He's going back and forth in the Q&A.
No worries. I mean, I think anything that is visible on chain, security relevant events, you're able to author a detection bot. There's also the opportunity to these detection bots are able to interact with internet to obtain additional information. So if you think, for instance, about flash bots that are really not clearly visible on chain, but flash bots have an explorer. You're able to kind of pull that in, and so not sure whether I'm kind of sidestepping the question, or what I'm trying to convey is that there's a lot of capabilities within the bots, and I think it's really up to your creativity in terms of what you're able to implement there.
Got it. Any other questions? I think, Hari, you're typing something. You just want to speak to it?
Yeah, I guess my question is, if Fortran becomes more popular in the future, do you see people starting to abuse these heuristics?
Well, it is an adversarial environment, and so as Forta becomes more popular, I think attackers will pay attention to what sort of bots are deployed and trying to evade detection. I think that is a characteristic of the security space. Traditionally, if I think about Web 2 companies, they of course have large teams internally that are always continuing to improve the detection and protection capabilities. I think the big differentiator and advantage that Forta has is that it is a community-driven project. And so that brings a lot of diversity and different perspectives and approaches to solving these monitoring and security issues. And so I feel like with that, kind of even just kind of from a numbers game, as well as again kind of the diversity, it will start flipping the balance into favorably towards the defenders.
Yeah, interesting.
Can you hear me
just
okay?
to follow up? Yeah, I can hear.
Oh,
I
sorry.
can hear you. Yeah. Just to follow up, I guess my point is more about an attacker trying to create a lot of false positives because they understand the heuristics exactly, and this might lead to maybe the monitoring team to just ignore anything that come out of the bot.
Yeah,
Do you see that happening?
That's an excellent point. And I think, even today, if you look at kind of how many attacks have happened, it's several dozens, I want to say, like DeFi exploits over the last few months. And there is currently some noise in the alerts that are being raised. And I absolutely agree with you that could lead to alert fatigue, right? Where protocol subscribes these alerts and most of the alerts turn out to be false positives. And then eventually they will start ignoring alerts. And so that obviously is not the way that should go. And so what we are heavily investing in with the community is in better solutions to separate signal from noise, and kind of the time series analysis contest that I'm showing here on the screen is a good example of that. Because basically this contest was looking at high gas fees. And up until this contest, we had several bots that alerted on high gas. And the way they were implemented were with a simple threshold, not taking into account network congestion, not taking into account seasonality, and that led to a lot of false positives. And so a time series anomaly detection approach does take into account all of these to, again, better separate signal from the noise. The other thing that I haven't mentioned yet is that we also have an API that allows you to subscribe to alerts and analyze alerts. And what that does, and I actually saw this, and I have to investigate this after I get off the call. This is an alert we call alert combiner, which essentially takes a bunch of noisy alerts. So think of these are somewhat noisy, and combines them and only raises a critical alert if all of these four stages of the attacks, the kill chain essentially, are triggered. So if we observe funding, preparation, attack, and money laundering, then raise an alert. And that is one technique to, again, better separate the signal from the noise. And I think there's a lot of opportunity from a data science perspective to take, existing heuristic alerts, look at them in aggregate, look at them from a historical perspective, to better separate signal from the noise, to really prevent what you're talking about, alert fatigue, where, hey, if Forta raises an alert, I better get going and take it seriously and take action on it, as opposed to being distracted by a constant stream of noise.
I wanted to follow up on Hari's question with, is there a way to view the source code related to what the heuristics these bots are running? If I would, say, build a bot and ask for someone to host it, how do they review the source code that my bot is performing safe operations on their computer? And is there any type of peer review from bot builder to bot builder?
Well, most of the bots are open source. So here I'm pulling up the bot search page. So let's look at Chainalysis sanction address, one that just got deployed by somebody recently. And so then you're able to pull up kind of the bot page, which also gives you indication on who developed it. So there's some reputation associated with that. And then in the documentation, it usually provides information about the GitHub repo. This one
So if you click on log data, it's usually in there somewhere. Perhaps. No. Okay.
I know when you deploy a bot, you are asked to submit a link to the GitHub repo. Now that I'm clicking through this, I think we're not making that easily accessible. But again, most of the bots are open source and allow you to review the code.
Is there any incentive to obfuscate your code from other bot developers to prevent? I don't know how the economics of Forta work, but I would. Are the bot developers incentivized with some kind of token, and they would want to obfuscate their source code from other builders to not copy their operations?
Andy, you want to take that one?
Yeah, I will. So I think that question came from Plachi. So one comment on your earlier question too, around sort of how you prevent sort of spam or malicious bots from being submitted. So there's a couple different levers we have at our disposal. Some of them are sort of design related, so how you can sort of somewhat restrict what a bot's able to do, with the intention of sort of preventing, for example, someone from like mining inside of a bot, for example, right? Like that would be very wasteful from a resource standpoint, and not particularly relevant to Forta. So there are things like that, but we are also implementing a minimum stake for bots. So developers will need to put up a small amount of Fort when they publish a bot. And again, just to discourage spam and malicious activity. So that's on the sort of the credibility of the bots. To your question about economics for bot developers and the benefit of sort of obfuscating your code, so currently. We do not have an incentive mechanism for bot developers. We are giving node runners sort of weekly rewards, because they're the ones that are doing sort of the work running these bots, and they have a cost associated with that. We are considering things like retroactive public goods funding. So if we see, for example, that a bot is subscribed to by 500 different addresses, for example, and has been involved in the early detection of multiple hacks over the last 6 months, right? That's clearly providing value to the network and our users, and so we would want to retroactively reward that. But it's without an alert history, it's a little bit harder to tell sort of what the value of each of these bots is. So I know we'll probably do something around retroactive public goods funding. Christian, I don't know if you had any other ideas on sort of economics here, but we do have the contest, which is sort of that's a more sort of controlled environment where bot developers can get compensated for doing certain things. And actually, the last thing I'll say too, and this is taking a different angle to your question, but most of the protocols that we work with, whether it's Maker, Compound, Aave, DUIDX, Balancer, Lido, Instep, most of them actually outsource bot development to third-party devs, and they'll fund it with a grant or a bounty. The only teams I can think of off the top of my head that actually do the bot development in-house, and it's because they have the developer bandwidth to do it, are Lido and Instadap. I think over 90% of our protocol users outsource bot development. So that's another avenue for both dev teams and individual developers to get involved in the community and earn. Christian, I know you had a comment too.
No, I think you already mentioned it with retroactive public goods funding. I mean, in the security space and with the bots, you don't know which ones are valuable until an attack occurs and the bot help you to mitigate. And so we're certainly thinking about how can we utilize retroactive public goods funding to reward bot developers that way.
Got it. Thanks for doing this. Appreciate it.
Balaji, did you have any ideas, suggestions there? We'd love to consider feedback from other folks that have seen other models that have worked well.
The reason why I asked that line of questioning was because I would agree that incentivizing bot developers directly would lead to a lot of them purposely hiding what their code is doing so that others wouldn't copy it and try to, I guess, sell it first to new protocols that were looking for bots. So I think there isn't a great, off the top of our heads, way to incentivize that directly, but like the line of thinking you're taking seems to be adequate.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I know you're reminding me of an example of that we see. It's a smaller scale, but Christian, I know, was talking about the contest earlier, and we have a couple developers in our community that are very good bot developers, and they participate in every contest, and they usually win. But we've noticed that they usually wait until the very end of the contest to submit their code because they don't want other developers to see their submission and then just copy and paste. So yeah, I think you're dead on there, and we're seeing that happen in a slightly different way.
Any other questions? All right, nothing heard. Forta team, any closing thoughts?
No, thanks again for the invitation. Super thrilled to be able to talk to the Spearbit community. You guys are all doing amazing work, and hope to see you get involved in Forta. As I said, the contest is coming up next week. Take a look at that, and if you're interested in a follow-up session to deep dive into bot development. Happy to jump on another call sometimes in the near future. Thanks all for coming and all the great questions.